My wife left me for my father thinking he would inherit my grandfather's fortune. It turned out my grandfather left everything to me, and now she begs me to forgive her and start over. You know that feeling when you think your life is going pretty darn well, and then bam, everything hits the fan faster than a tornado in Kansas? Yeah, that's exactly what happened to me. Name's Mark. I'm 30 years old, and up until recently I thought I had it all figured out. I work as a manager at this decent tech company here in Windsor. Not exactly Silicon Valley, but hey, it pays the bills and then some. The thing is, I've always prided myself on earning everything through good old-fashioned hard work. Maybe it's because I learned early on what happens when you don't. See, my dad, Victor, is basically the poster child for what happens when everything gets handed to you on a silver platter. The guy's 55 now, supposedly some hotshot realtor around town, but between you and me, he's been coasting on his daddy's coattails his entire life. My grandpa Leo, now there was a man who knew how to work, built up this whole real estate empire from scratch. But Victor, he just expected everything to fall into his lap, like autumn leaves. Growing up, I barely saw the guy. My grandparents practically raised me because Victor was always too busy with his parties, his golf buddies, or whatever flavor of the month girlfriend he had at the time. I remember being maybe 6 years old and genuinely thinking Grandpa Leo and Grandma Ruth were my real parents, and Victor was just some older cousin who showed up for holidays and birthdays when he felt like it. That abandonment messed with my head big time. It made me determined to prove I could make something of myself without depending on anyone else. While other kids were asking their parents for help with everything, I was figuring out my homework alone, getting my first job at 14, saving every penny for college. I swore I'd never be like Victor, never be that guy who takes the easy road and lets other people carry him through life. Fast forward to 3 years ago, I met Lisa. Beautiful, smart, funny, the whole package. She worked at this marketing firm downtown, drove a sensible Honda Civic, and seemed to appreciate that I'd built my career from the ground up. We clicked immediately. She wasn't one of those high-maintenance types who expected designer everything, and I thought I'd finally found someone who shared my values about working hard and being independent. We got married in a simple ceremony at the local country club. Nothing too fancy, just close friends and family. Even Victor showed up, surprisingly sober and wearing an actual suit instead of his usual polo shirt and khakis combo. For once in my life, I thought maybe we could have a normal father-son relationship. Boy, was I wrong about that. Our marriage seemed solid. Lisa and I had our routines. Netflix on weeknights, hiking on weekends, the occasional dinner out at Applebee's, or that new Italian place on Main Street. We talked about buying a house, maybe starting a family in a few years. I was working toward a promotion that would put us in even better financial shape. Everything felt stable and predictable in the best possible way. Then came the day that flipped my entire world upside down. I remember it was a Tuesday because I had that weekly team meeting I always dreaded. I came home around 6:30, expecting to find Lisa cooking dinner or watching one of her reality shows. Instead, she was sitting at our kitchen table with this weird expression on her face, like she was trying to solve a math problem that didn't add up. She started with a classic line about how we needed to talk. Already, alarm bells were going off in my head because nobody ever says that before sharing good news. But what came next was like getting hit by a freight train made of pure betrayal and humiliation. Lisa told me she was leaving me, not for another job in another city, not because we weren't compatible, not because of some typical marriage problem you might work through with counseling. No, she was leaving me for my dad. My 55-year-old, perpetually irresponsible, never held a real job in his life father. The room started spinning. I honestly thought I was having some kind of medical episode because this couldn't be real life. This was the kind of twisted soap opera nonsense that happens to other people, not to guys like me who mind their own business and try to do everything right. But wait, it gets worse. She confessed that their affair had been going on for months. Months. While I was busting my tail at work, planning our future, being the devoted husband, she was sneaking around with Victor behind my back. The betrayal cut so deep I could barely breathe. The worst part? She tried to justify it by talking about feelings and connections and other complete garbage. But I could see right through that nonsense. This wasn't about love or romance or any of that Hallmark movie stuff. This was about money, pure and simple. Lisa had always been impressed by Victor's flashy lifestyle. The expensive dinners, the country club membership, the way he threw cash around like it was confetti. What she didn't know, and what Victor probably didn't bother explaining, was that none of that wealth actually belonged to him. Every dollar came from Grandpa Leo's generosity and connections. Victor was basically a 55-year-old trust fund baby who'd never learned to stand on his own 2 feet. But from the outside, especially to someone who didn't know our family history, he probably looked like some successful businessman living the dream. The humiliation was crushing. Here I was, working my butt off to build something real and lasting, and my own wife chose a lazy, irresponsible path represented by my father. It felt like every insecurity I'd ever had about not being good enough, not being successful enough, was being thrown back in my face by the 2 people who were supposed to care about me most. That night, after Lisa packed her bags and left for Victor's place, I sat alone in our kitchen staring at the wall and wondering how everything had gone so completely wrong. Little did I know, the universe had a few more surprises waiting for me. So there I was, sitting in my empty kitchen like some tragic country song, wondering if my life could possibly get any worse. Spoiler alert, it was about to get a whole lot more interesting, just not in the way I expected. The next few days were a complete blur of rage, confusion, and way too much takeout pizza. I couldn't focus at work, I couldn't sleep, and I definitely couldn't stop thinking about how my own father had stabbed me in the back. The betrayal was eating me alive from the inside out, and I needed to do something about it before I completely lost my mind. That's when I made what was probably not my smartest decision. I decided to text Victor and tell him exactly what I thought of him. Now, normally I'm not the type to start family drama over text messages. I mean, what am I, 16? But desperate times call for desperate measures. And brother, I was desperate for some kind of release from all this anger. I typed out this absolutely scathing message, calling him a selfish piece of work, and the worst excuse for a father in the history of fatherhood. I might have used some colorful language that would make my grandmother roll over in her grave. The whole thing was probably 3 paragraphs of pure, unfiltered rage that I've been bottling up for 30 years. What happened next absolutely blew my mind. Instead of apologizing or trying to explain himself like a normal human being, Victor actually had the nerve to text back bragging about his upcoming inheritance from Grandpa Leo. The old man had passed away about a year ago, and apparently Victor was feeling pretty confident about what was coming his way. He started going on about how he was going to be set for life, how Lisa had made the smart choice by picking the winner, and how I should probably start being nicer to him since he'd be the one with all the money soon. The arrogance was absolutely unbelievable. Here he was, having an affair with my wife, and he's basically rubbing salt in the wound by bragging about inheriting money he didn't earn. But here's the thing that really got under my skin. He was probably right about Lisa's motivations. She'd always been impressed by his flashy lifestyle, and she thought he was about to come into serious money. That would explain a lot about why she suddenly found him so irresistible. Gold digger's gonna dig, am I right? That's when I remembered something crucial that Victor had apparently forgotten in all his gloating. Grandpa Leo's will had this weird clause that the details wouldn't be revealed until exactly 1 year after his death. Something about avoiding family conflicts and giving everyone time to grieve properly before money became an issue. At the time, it seemed like typical Leo, always thinking 3 steps ahead and trying to keep the family together. Victor's texts were getting more and more smug by the minute. He was laying on thick about how Lisa had chosen wisely, how she'd always been too good for me anyway, and how they were planning this amazing future together once the inheritance came through. Reading those messages felt like getting punched in the gut repeatedly, but it also lit a fire under me. I immediately called my lawyer. Yes, I have a lawyer because unlike some people, I plan ahead for life's curveballs. I told him I wanted to file for divorce as quickly as possible. No counseling, no trial separation, no working things out. I wanted Lisa out of my life permanently before she could do any more damage. The lawyer asked if I was sure I didn't want to try mediation first, since divorce can get expensive and messy. I told him that when your wife runs off with your dad, you're pretty much past the point of working things out over coffee and couples therapy. Some bridges aren't just burned, They're completely nuked from orbit. While we were getting the paperwork ready, I started thinking about that inheritance situation. Victor seemed awfully confident about what he was going to receive, but knowing Grandpa Leo the way I did, I had this nagging feeling that things might not go exactly as planned. Leo was one of those old-school guys who believed in earning what you got, and Victor had never earned anything in his entire life. I remembered all those conversations I'd had with Grandpa over the years. He used to tell me stories about building his business from nothing, working 16-hour days, making tough decisions that other people wouldn't make. He'd always seemed disappointed in Victor's lack of ambition and constant need for handouts, but he never said anything directly. Leo was too much of a gentleman for that. But I also remembered the way his eyes would light up when I told him about my job, my promotions, my plans for the future. He was proud that I'd made something of myself without relying on family money. He used a joke that I got the work ethic that somehow skipped Victor's generation entirely. As the days passed and the divorce proceedings moved forward, I started to feel something I hadn't experienced in a long time: anticipation. Not the good kind you get before vacation or a promotion, but that weird feeling when you know something big is about to happen and you're not sure if it's going to be amazing or terrible. Lisa signed the divorce papers without any fuss, which honestly surprised me. I thought she might try to fight for half of everything or demand alimony or pull some other typical divorce spouse nonsense. But she was probably too distracted thinking about all that inheritance money to worry about my relatively modest assets. In her mind, she was trading up from a middle manager to a millionaire. Poor girl had no idea what was actually coming. The day of the will reading finally arrived, and let me tell you, I was more nervous than a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. I'd specifically asked the lawyer to schedule my appointment separately from Victor and Lisa, because frankly, I couldn't stomach the thought of watching them celebrate their windfall right in front of me. I walked into the law office expecting to hear that I'd inherited maybe some old furniture or Grandpa's fishing gear, something sentimental but not particularly valuable. After all, Victor was the oldest son, and in families like ours, tradition usually means the firstborn gets the lion's share of everything, regardless of whether they deserve it or not. The lawyer, this distinguished older gentleman who'd been handling Leo's affairs for decades, had me sit down in one of those fancy leather chairs that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. He poured himself some coffee from an expensive-looking machine and asked if I wanted any. I was way too anxious to drink anything without risking it coming right back up. Then he opened that manila envelope that had been sitting on his desk like some kind of time bomb for the past year. The suspense was absolutely killing me. He cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and started reading in this formal lawyer voice that made everything sound incredibly serious and official. What I heard next completely knocked me flat on my rear end. Grandpa Leo hadn't just left me a token inheritance or some meaningless family heirlooms. He'd left me everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything: the house, the rental properties, the business assets, the investment accounts, the whole enchilada. I literally had to ask the lawyer to repeat himself, because I was sure I'd misheard something. But nope. It was all there in black and white legal language that basically translated to Grandpa Leo thinking I was the only family member responsible enough to handle serious money. The old man had been paying attention all those years, and he'd made his decision based on who had actually earned it. But wait, there's more, and this is where it gets absolutely hilarious. Victor didn't get completely cut out of the will. Oh no. Grandpa Leo was too classy for that kind of drama. Instead, he left Victor something that was technically valuable but practically useless: this ancient broken pocket watch that hadn't kept correct time since the Carter administration. The lawyer explained that Leo had included a note about the watch. Say it was meant to remind Victor that time was precious and shouldn't be wasted, and that maybe someday he'd learn to value hard work and responsibility. It was basically the classiest way possible to tell someone they'd been a disappointment their entire adult life. I sat there for probably 5 minutes just staring at the paperwork, trying to process what had just happened. My grandfather, who I'd always looked up to but never expected much from inheritance-wise, had completely turned the tables on everyone's expectations. He'd seen through Victor's act and Lisa's gold-digging ways before I'd even realized what was happening. The best part was realizing that Victor had been bragging to Lisa for months about this massive inheritance that was never going to materialize. All those smug text messages about being set for life. All that gloating about Lisa making the smart choice. It was all based on assumptions that were about to blow up in their faces spectacularly. I thanked a lawyer, signed whatever paperwork needed signing, and walked out of that office feeling like I just won the lottery and gotten revenge on my enemies all in the same afternoon. The irony was absolutely beautiful. While I'd been building my own life through hard work and responsibility, I'd also been proving to Grandpa Leo that I deserved his legacy. But here's what really got me choked up about the whole thing. The lawyer mentioned that Leo had updated his will just 6 months before he died, right around the time Victor had come asking for another loan to cover some bad business deal. Leo had finally realized that continuing to enable Victor wasn't helping anyone, and he wanted to make sure his life's work went to someone who would respect it. I drove home in a complete daze, trying to wrap my head around how dramatically my life had just changed. Just a few weeks ago, I was a middle manager going through a nasty divorce, feeling like the biggest loser in the world. Now I was suddenly wealthy beyond my wildest dreams, and my cheating wife and deadbeat father were about to get the shock of their lives. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Victor and Lisa were probably at their own appointment right about now, expecting to celebrate their financial windfall. Instead, they were about to discover that their entire relationship was built on a foundation of fool's gold and wishful thinking. I couldn't help but laugh thinking about Victor's face when he realized that his big inheritance was a broken watch and a lecture about responsibility from beyond the grave. And Lisa, oh man, Lisa was about to find out that she'd traded a stable marriage for a relationship with a guy whose main asset was now a timepiece that couldn't even tell time correctly. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, I felt like maybe things are going to work out after all. Sometimes life has a funny way of balancing the scales when you least expect it. Grandpa Leo had taught me one final lesson about patience, hard work, and the importance of character over appearances. And he'd done it in a way that was going to teach Victor and Lisa a lesson they'd never forget. So picture this. I'm sitting at home that evening, still trying to process the fact that I'd gone from heartbroken divorce guy to unexpected millionaire in the span of about 3 hours, when my phone starts buzzing like an angry bee trapped in a jar. The first few messages were from numbers I didn't recognize, but then I saw Lisa's name pop up on my screen. Now, we hadn't spoken since she signed those divorce papers faster than a NASCAR pit crew changes tires. So I was definitely curious about what could possibly be so urgent that she needed to contact me now. What I read next was absolutely priceless. And I mean that literally, since we're talking about millions of dollars here. Lisa had somehow found out about the real inheritance situation. Probably from Victor's epic meltdown when he discovered his grand prize was a broken timepiece instead of a treasure chest. Her messages were this beautiful combination of panic, desperation, and what I can only describe as Olympic-level backpedaling. She started off claiming that leaving me was the biggest mistake of her life, and that spending just a few days with Victor had made her realize how much she truly loved me. The whole thing read like a bad romance novel written by someone having a nervous breakdown. She went on about how Victor was actually a terrible person, which, I could have told her that years ago, and how she'd been temporarily insane or confused or under some kind of spell. The excuses kept getting more and more ridiculous with each text message. At one point, she actually blamed it on stress from her job, as if workplace anxiety typically causes people to have affairs with their father-in-law. Then came the begging. Oh man, the begging was just pathetic. She was practically writing poetry about second chances, and how couples can work through anything if they really love each other. She promised counseling, therapy, couples retreats, whatever it would take to fix our relationship. The woman was pulling out every cliche in the book like her life depended on it. But here's what really cracked me up. She kept mentioning how she never cared about money, and how she just wanted us to be happy together regardless of our financial situation. Yeah, right, lady? If money didn't matter, why'd you jump ship the second you thought Victor was going to strike it rich? The timing of his sudden change of heart was about as subtle as a freight train. I sat there reading these increasingly frantic messages and just started laughing. Not a bitter, angry laugh, but genuine amusement at the sheer audacity of it all. This woman had literally destroyed our marriage for what she thought was a better financial opportunity, and now that the money had gone to me instead, she wanted to pretend like none of that ever happened. So I did what any reasonable person would do in this situation. I sent her a single clown emoji and blocked her number. Sometimes the perfect response doesn't require a lot of words, you know? That little clown face said everything I needed to say about what I thought of her sudden declaration of love. But I wasn't quite done with my revenge tour yet. I took a screenshot of her pathetic message and forwarded it to Victor along with a few more clown emojis, just to make sure he knew exactly how loyal his new girlfriend really was. I figured if they were going to blow up my life, the least I could do was return the favor with some chaos of my own. The results exceeded my wildest expectations. My neighbor's kid, this 14-year-old who's always been pretty cool and sometimes helps me with yard work, came running over the next morning with eyes as wide as dinner plates. Apparently, World War III had erupted at Victor's place sometime around midnight. According to the kid, who'd heard everything through his bedroom window, Victor had completely lost his mind when he saw Lisa's messages to me. The shouting match that followed probably woke up half the neighborhood and definitely provided better entertainment than anything on cable TV that night. Things got physical when Victor, in his rage about both the inheritance and Lisa's attempt to crawl back to me, threw a ceramic vase across the room. Lisa tried to duck, but a big chunk of it caught her right on the arm, cutting her deep enough that she needed actual medical attention. We're talking stitches, bandages, the whole 9 yards. The police showed up because neighbors started calling in noise complaints and domestic disturbance reports. But here's where Victor's connections around town came in handy for him. The guy's been schmoozing with local politicians and law enforcement for decades, playing golf with the mayor, contributing to police fundraisers, all that small-town networking stuff. So instead of getting arrested for assault like any normal person would, Victor got off with what was basically a slap on the wrist, a fine, and a stern talking to. Must be nice to live in a place where knowing the right people can get you out of serious legal trouble, right? The whole thing was absolutely infuriating from a justice perspective, but also kind of hilarious from a karma perspective. Meanwhile, Lisa had apparently gotten hold of another phone and started bombing me with messages from a different number. These weren't love letters this time. Oh no, now I was getting the full blame treatment. According to her twisted logic, everything that had happened was somehow my fault for forwarding her message to Victor and stirring up trouble between them. The mental gymnastics required to reach that conclusion were absolutely Olympic level. Let me get this straight. She cheats on me with my father, leaves me for what she thinks is a better financial situation, tries to come crawling back when the money goes to me instead, and somehow I'm a villain for sharing her messages? The lack of self-awareness was genuinely impressive in the worst possible way. For a hot minute there, I actually started wondering if maybe I'd gone too far with the whole screenshot situation. I mean, seeing someone get hurt, even someone who completely screwed me over, wasn't exactly the outcome I'd been hoping for. But then I remembered that I hadn't thrown any vases or started any physical fights. I'd just shared the truth about what Lisa had said. If they couldn't handle the consequences of their own actions, that was on them, not me. Unfortunately, Lisa wasn't done making my life complicated. The harassment from her new phone number continued for several more days, and the messages were getting progressively more unhinged. She was alternating between blaming me for ruining her relationship with Victor and trying to convince me that we were soulmates who belonged together regardless of money or family drama. The whole situation came to a head about a week later when I was coming home from work one evening. I pulled into my driveway and there was Lisa sitting on my front steps like some kind of deranged garden gnome. She looked absolutely terrible. Her arm was still bandaged up from the vase incident. Her hair was a mess, and she had that wild look in her eyes that screamed desperation. I tried to just walk past her and get into my house, but she started following me and yelling about how I needed to listen to her and give her another chance. The whole scene was getting uncomfortably loud and dramatic. Definitely not the kind of thing I wanted my neighbors witnessing on a regular Tuesday evening. When I told her to leave my property and never come back, that's when things got really interesting. Lisa, apparently having learned nothing from her recent emergency room visit, decided the best way to express her feelings was through violence. She hauled off and kicked my car door so hard that it left a massive dent in the metal. Now, I'm not normally the type to involve lawyers in every little dispute, but this was clearly a situation that called for professional intervention. Plus, and this is the beautiful part, I had the whole thing recorded on my security cameras. Crystal clear footage of Lisa trespassing on my property, harassing me, and then deliberately damaging my vehicle. It was like she'd handed me a gift-wrapped case for a restraining order. I called my lawyer first thing the next morning and explained the situation. He was actually excited to take on the case because the evidence was so ironclad. Security camera footage of property damage is basically the legal equivalent of catching someone red-handed with their fingers in the cookie jar. The restraining order process was surprisingly straightforward. We filed the paperwork, provided the video evidence, and within a few days I had official court documents ordering Lisa to stay at least 100 yards away from me, my home, and my workplace. Violating it would mean serious legal consequences, not just a friendly warning from police officers who play golf with her boyfriend's daddy. The local cops were typically useless, probably because of Victor's connections. But restraining orders don't really require police cooperation to be effective. It's a federal court document, which means it carries weight regardless of small-town politics. Lisa could test it if she wanted to, but that would involve way more serious legal trouble than she was probably prepared to handle. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings were moving along smoothly. My lawyer had documented all of Lisa's infidelity, the harassment, the property damage, everything. Between her affair with Victor and her subsequent stalker behavior, I was in a pretty solid position to get extremely favorable terms in the settlement. Sometimes being the wrong party actually works in your favor, legally speaking. I also started seeing a therapist, which was probably the smartest decision I made during this whole mess. Not because I was falling apart or anything, but because dealing with this level of betrayal and family dysfunction can really mess with your head if you don't process it properly. I didn't want to become bitter and cynical like Victor, and I definitely didn't want to let Lisa's craziness turn me into some kind of paranoid hermit. The therapist helped me realize that while this whole situation was absolutely insane, it had actually revealed some important truths about the people in my life. Lisa had shown her true colors when she thought there was money involved, and Victor had proven once and for all that he was exactly the selfish, irresponsible person I'd always known him to be. But more importantly, Grandpa Leo had shown me, even from beyond the grave, that he'd been paying attention all those years. He'd seen the kind of man I was becoming, and decided that I was worthy of his trust and his legacy. That meant more to me than all the money in the world, honestly. These days, I'm doing pretty well. The inheritance is being managed properly. The divorce is almost finalized, and Lisa seems to have gotten a message about staying away from me. I heard through the grapevine that she and Victor broke up after their big fight, which isn't exactly surprising given that their whole relationship was based on greed and poor decision-making. I'm not sure what the future holds, but for the first time in months, I'm actually excited to find out. I've got financial security thanks to Grandpa Leo's wisdom, legal protection from Lisa's drama, and the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes good things really do happen to people who work hard and try to do the right thing. The broken pocket watch that Victor inherited is apparently sitting on his kitchen counter, still not keeping time correctly. I like to think of it as a daily reminder that actions have consequences, and that you can't coast through life expecting other people to carry you forever. Some lessons are worth more than money, even if they come wrapped in bitter disappointment. So that's my story, folks. Sometimes life throws you curveballs that knock you flat on your back, but sometimes those same curveballs end up being exactly what you needed to move forward. I went from betrayed husband to wealthy bachelor in the span of a few weeks, and honestly, I wouldn't trade this crazy experience for anything. It taught me who my real family was, showed me what I'm capable of handling, and gave me the freedom to build whatever kind of future I want. What do you think about this whole wild ride? Have you ever had family drama that made you question everything you thought you knew about the people closest to you? Drop a comment below and let me know. I love hearing other people's stories about life's unexpected plot twists. And hey, if you enjoyed this insane tale of inheritance, betrayal, and cosmic justice, smash that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories that prove truth really is stranger than fiction. Thanks for sticking with me through this crazy journey, and I'll see you in the next one.